And we're back with another crazy week in technology with the Tech Time podcast. This is your source for all things technology. And man, a lot of things happened this week. The WWDC, we're going to talk about all of the announcements. But first of all, Matt, how are you doing over there in Canada?
Doing pretty good, Dan. How about you?
Oh, good. Okay, so I actually had a chance to use the Bird again last night, the
Oh
Bird
yeah.
scooters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get this crazy text message from Bird, and they say you have $8.75, 0.75 left to use on your account.
Yeah.
I was like, did they mess up? How can you have 8.75.75 worth left of my is this an IP address? What is this?
0.75 of a penny.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I have to use it because when
Yeah.
you came to visit, I had to buy $10 worth.
Yeah, yeah.
And so anyway, I was in Santa Monica last night and I zipped around and used $2 more.
Whee! $2 more.
Yes. I still think it's a fad. I don't picture it lasting any more than 5 years.
Well, I
Somebody
saw,
was saying there's
yeah.
a new pogo stick you can rent now.
What? So is it an electric one? It counts how many hops you do?
Think about how efficient it would be to get from point A to point B with a pogo stick. Yeah. You could pogo stick with your crush. I don't know.
Well, I actually saw an article that said those scooters are coming to Canada.
Oh yeah, with the ice
Yeah.
and snow.
Well, they've been talking about it for a while. I don't think they're going to work so well in the ice and snow, but they'd be pretty awesome in the summer and fall and
Yes,
spring.
definitely.
But boy, you're going to get a lot of damaged scooters in the winter, that's for sure.
Just picture going across the high-level bridge from the U of A all the way over to the
To the
legislature,
ledge. It
right?
would be awesome, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds great.
I'd
Um,
do it.
Speaking of great things, man, I'm excited for the Stadia announcement this Thursday. So if you guys remember on one of our previous podcasts, we talk about Google's new video game service that they're going to launch, and it's like shrouded in mystery. How much is it going to cost? Is it going to be a monthly thing? Can you use your PlayStation controller or Xbox One S controller? And so all of that's going to be answered Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So everybody tune in, and if not, tune into our podcast next week.
Yeah, we're excited about that for sure. And, there's a lot of competitors for Stadia. And in fact, one of the things we're going to talk about today is WWDC 19. And they actually kind of address Stadia a little bit. We know that Apple's going to have their own game streaming program. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Arcade. It's called Arcade Gaming Subscription. And they actually announced that your PlayStation 4 and your Xbox controllers are going to be able to work on an Apple TV and also on iOS. So it sounds like you'll be able to use them on your iPads or your phones. And so that's kind of cool that you'd be able to have a real gaming controller instead of the on-screen controls or some of the ones that you plug in to the bottom that have been like hacks that kind of do it, but not very responsive. So, I think everybody's gearing up for the streaming gaming wars. I do have a little bit of experience with GeForce Now.
Okay.
I was trying to figure out if I could get these really nice high-end games to work on some of my laptops or my iMac. You really need a good connection.
Really?
For it to work. Yeah. Hotel Wi-Fi
Nope.
doesn't work. Even the Wi-Fi in my own home, the 2.4 gigahertz, it's too choppy. And although if I can get on the 5 gigahertz frequency, and if I'm right above my router, then yes, I can do GeForce Now just fine, and it works. So that's kind of cool. So I really think it depends on your setup, and you've really got to have a good connection to your computer for these streaming things to work.
What kind of games were you playing on GeForce Now? Is it a certain company that does it, or any Steam game, or?
Any Steam game works, so that's what I was doing. If you can prove that you actually own the game, either through Steam or a few other accounts, then they'll let you play it. And the ones that they have in their library, I think, are more streamlined than if you virtually access your Steam library on whatever computer they've set up for you. So that's how I've been playing. I set up Civ 6,
Cool.
and was playing it, and it was just super choppy unless I was like right above my router and
Oh,
on
shoot.
the 5 gigahertz frequency. So anyways, interesting, and I think it's got a lot of potential, but really our interior infrastructure has to improve.
Well, do you
And
remember when streaming videos first started, like back
oh
in the
yeah,
late 90s, and it was
so
like chunk,
choppy.
chunk, chunk, chunk? You'd try to
Yeah,
watch a movie trailer with your friends, and it was
yeah,
better to just let it download because
yeah.
streaming it just took forever.
Just download it for an hour and then watch your movie trailer. That's
Yes,
how
I
you,
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So lots of things. Did you get a chance to watch WWDC?
Yeah, actually, what I did was I had the Engadget live streaming page up, and
Oh yeah.
so it would just update itself, and then well, when I had a chance, I just look at it throughout the day. And I was a little bit underwhelmed,
Were you underwhelmed?
honestly.
I wanted to know, what did you think? Because I just watched the highlights,
Yeah.
and I watched the highlights at double speed. So they're like everything you need to know in 12 minutes. So I got it done in 6.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Yeah, mine was like 2 hours of refreshing the page, and it's like,
Wah.
and now we can monitor women's cycles with the Apple with the Apple Watch. It's like, is this really an announcement? Don't they
Woo!
already have apps that do that? I don't
Oh
know.
yeah,
I
there've been
was
third-party apps that have
underwhelmed.
been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
I had that on my Palm Pilot because not for my cycle. But when you're trying to have kids, it was important.
Okay, yeah, yeah. All right.
All
Well,
right, so okay, you were underwhelmed. To you, what was the most exciting aspect?
oh,
So,
to me, honestly, I was really hoping macOS Catalina would be more exciting because I have an Apple
yeah.
laptop, and I was hoping for maybe a new look or maybe a
Hmm.
little bit faster, a little bit more dynamic and sleek. And really, the only thing they said is if you have an iPad, now you can, use it as a second monitor.
Woo!
Underwhelmed.
Well,
Yeah.
here's the one thing I thought was interesting about it is they now have a compiling tool, I think is what it is. So any app that's created for iOS, you just compile it through this tool and now it will work on OS Mac or Mac OS. So that's kind of cool, but haven't we had that before? Like, couldn't you just play iOS games on Mac OS anyways? And I'm pretty sure you had to, maybe they had an emulator and now it's going to work natively on it. I'm
Well,
not sure.
it hasn't been hard in the past. I mean, I'm a software developer, and
Hmm.
there's easy ways that you can change compiler flags and just have it compile for OS 10 instead of iOS. And
Yeah.
so it's not like it's difficult, but it sounds like this will be even easier.
Yeah, so I mean, woo! Well, I got to tell you, the one thing I like the most is the new Mac Pro. And
Yeah, the cheese grater.
the cheese grater. So everybody's calling it the cheese grater. I actually kind of like the design.
Oh yeah.
And oh yeah, I've looked at a lot of towers because I'm in the market for getting a gaming PC, and it's a sexy tower. Is it worth $6,000?
No.
No.
What if you
And-
tripped and hit your head on it? It might grate the side of your head too, right?
But it's got a massive heat sink. It's got tons of fans. I think it's really set up for functionality and I don't think it looks terrible, but it is really overpriced. I mean, Apple has always been known for being overpriced, and this is ridiculously overpriced.
Yeah.
So let's jump into it.
Okay.
Let's talk about the base specs. So what do you get for $6,000? And then we'll talk about what you can get if you max it out. And I see you've actually priced that out.
Yep,
So,
I priced it out because they're ridiculous.
wait for it. So here we go. Base spec, $6,000. You get an 8-core Xeon processor.
Okay.
Whee!
Well, remember last week we talked about the new AMD ones that are like
Yes.
12 or something crazy,
12,
right? Yeah.
12 cores. Now, Xeon processors, Dan, have had way more than 8 cores for a long time,
Yeah.
and you can chain them up, and it's not unheard of to see easily 24 cores or even 64 cores, and you can. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you can just keep stacking them up, and so you can have a motherboard that would put 4, 5, 6 of these processors, and essentially you'll have a tower that has like 64 cores in it. So to start out with an 8 core is and they actually max up to 28 cores, but we're not going to talk about that yet. We're going to just talk about $6,000. What do you get for $6,000? So you get 32 gigabytes of RAM. Yeah, all right, that's pretty nice. You get 32 gig of RAM. Now you also get a Radeon Pro 580X. Now that's your GPU or your graphics card, and that's 8 gigabytes of RAM that comes with that. So I was trying to Google it and see what the specs are for the 580X because they kept talking about how amazing this video card is and how it's the top of the line, but it looks like it gets totally beat out by the 1080 or the 2080 Ti's.
Oh yeah.
And so I don't see how they can say it's the best, but I was looking at the Radeon Pro 580s, not the Radeon Pro 580Xs.
Ooh.
All right, so maybe the X brings a little extra in there, but I honestly don't think so. When I did look at the specs for it, it is only an 8 gigabyte RAM GPU.
Right.
And I'm actually looking at 2-year-old 1080 Ti's that are 11 gigabytes.
Oh yeah.
Those are 2 years old. But anyways, they chose to go, which is interesting because Radeon is made by AMD, and yet they have an Intel Xeon processor. So interesting choice that they're actually switching, like they're mixing the two. But anyways, and it also comes for $6,000 with a 256 gigabyte SSD.
One of our YouTube videos would take up that whole hard drive. What are they thinking?
Well, the funny thing about that is, Dan, is I started pricing this out because they're like comparable builds would cost $8,000, but
No. Do they mean 800 or $80?
I was like, I can easily build this for 1,000 Canadian, easy.
Easy.
But anyways, they're saying it's $8,000, and so a 256 gigabyte SSD. I was just on Newegg, so in Canadian dollars, so drop 30% off of this. I could get like a $24 one. Now, it wasn't as high of an end, I'm sure. So let's just say like a super fast read and an NVMe 2, and it's going to be the 3rd gen, like in 4 channels. So let's just say the best of the best, $50. Right? Like
They're definitely have a high margin on this. In fact, I just read an article online that said if you want the highest one that they offer, it's $50,000.
50,000. Okay, let's see what you get for $50,000, or a Tesla.
Yeah, or a Tesla. And Teslas are doing their new trucks, which are going to be less than 40. But one thing I've got to say is it maxes out at 1.5 terabytes.
RAM.
Well, I think that was actually for hard drive space.
Because you buy a 2 terabyte SSD for 100.
That's what I thought too. That's why I was.
So this is what I wrote down. Your Intel Xeon processor, you can stack them up to 28 cores.
Okay.
And they're gonna bring. They made a big deal out of 300 watts of power for all 28 cores. Well, anybody who's got computers like this, you're already doing 1,000 watts. So I'm not really sure what they're talking about with the 300 watts. But anyways, then they're saying 1.5 terabytes of RAM. And the reason why I think it's RAM is they were talking about how they can stack them.
Right.
I originally had typed it all out and, like how many sticks of RAM, but I think it's you've got to stack them to get to the 1.5 terabytes of RAM. And that's a lot of RAM.
Right. And, you know what? It's 4 terabytes of storage. That's the max. Sorry.
Really?
I just looked it up. Yeah.
For about $100, I can get 2 hard drives. I can get 4 terabytes. But anyways, they're going to have 2 Radeon Pro Vega IIs for a total of 64 gigabytes of memory. Now, when you do look at the Radeon Pro Vega II graphics cards, those are sweet. Those are seriously the creme de la creme that AMD puts out. And they're seriously 32 gigabytes of RAM on each one. And they're crazy expensive. Like you're going to be paying $5-6 grand if you're going to try to buy these separately. So throw 2 in there, call it $10,000. Okay, well that's 10,000 out of the 50 grand. What's the rest for? Your hard drives?
Yeah. Well, here's what I want to know. What do you think about the new Retina display, the $5,000 one?
$5,000. I don't see any need. Yeah, I love how they call it Retina because wasn't it Retina before when they weren't getting up to the same specs that Windows was getting, and they're
Yeah.
like, instead of calling it 2K, they called it Retina, and since then we're at like 4K and 6K and 8K, but
Way better than Retina.
anyways, they call this one Retina too. Um, I think it's gorgeous. I think if I was somebody who worked for Disney and was making animation movies, things like that, I think it would be awesome, but go get something cheaper.
Well, and
It's
it's only 32 inches, right? So to pay $5,000 American for that is
yeah,
crazy.
but it is 6K. It's 6016, so
3K.
6016 by 3384. That's the resolution, 20 million
Right.
pixels.
Right.
So it's huge. But let's talk about the stand. A
Yeah.
thousand dollars for the stand. And they never were, they're like, and you can get this new Mac Pro for $6,000, and everybody in the audience, woo, $6,000. And I'm like, what? He just said it's got a 256 gigabyte SSD in this thing for $6,000. And then he had this slide, and it showed the Retina 6K panel for $5,000. Then it showed the Mac Pro for $6,000, and then it showed the stand $1,000.
Wow, just for the stand. So you have to buy the monitor and the stand separately.
Yes, and then it equals the same as your Mac Pro. So now you're $12,000 all in for the bare bones that you and I could put together for $1,000 easy, easy, easy,
Easy.
easy. So, anyways, it just made me laugh a little bit, and the internet laughed as well.
Well,
So,
the thing that's frustrating is that like those millennial places that are, startups and want to be cool, they're going to get all of these,
oh, sure they will.
and people that maybe aren't as savvy with how to build their own computers will just shell out 12 grand for this, no problem. Oh, we're an art
Yeah.
company. We need to have the best, even though it's not really.
There's nothing proprietary in here. There's nothing that makes it Apple needed. You
Right.
could say, well, you're going to have Mac OS in it.
Right.
You can do that for a lot cheaper. You don't need to spend $12,000 to have Mac OS. You can get those exact same components in a do-it-yourself, or even heck, I mean, you can go buy pre-made Windows boxes that would be, even with 50% markup, would still be $2,000, right? Like not 12,
It's
and that would
crazy.
include big screens with similar resolutions. But the stand, $1,000. Dan, the iPhone 10s is the same price.
As the stand.
Yeah. And so like there was this one Twitter account where it's like, what can I do with $1,000 stand? Can I make phone calls? Like, can I launch missiles? What can I do with
What can you
thousand
do?
dollar stand? It's
I'm really underwhelmed with this WWDC. I know I told it to you before. It's
yeah.
just nothing here is exciting to me. I mean, this is old technology. They're trying to sell us technology from a year ago for way more expensive.
Yeah.
It's just I don't get it.
It's funny. I also saw an article today that said um 10 cars you can buy that are cheaper than the new Mac Pro.
One of them's my car.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about iOS 13. There
Let's do
are a
it.
few cool things coming out with it. Dark mode. So I actually use dark mode on my Apple Mac, and I
Yeah.
love it because, if it's dark out or if you're, watching TV and the lights are down, it's nice to have it be a little bit darker. And it's great that Chrome finally caught up and Chrome has a dark mode now. So
Yes.
you'll get that now for iOS, which I'm looking forward to.
And I've been using dark mode on my Android for years.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh,
yeah,
I didn't realize that.
years we've had dark mode. And what's great about it is you're laying in bed and you want to read the news and you don't want to like and your pupils are like down to little pinpoints, and then you wake up your wife and then she's mad at you for being on your phone. So dark mode's just way better. Like, and if you have an OLED screen, it saves so much battery. It really does. And so, like, I think the reason why Apple hasn't done it in the past is they just barely got into the OLED market, right?
Right. Again, old technology. Here's another cool thing, the swipe keyboard. I cannot
Yes.
tell you how many times I'll look over at someone at work and they're like using their two fingers to mash on the screen. So, I
Swipe.
mean, we've all been using the Google keyboard to swipe forever now, right? But
Yeah.
now it's going to be mainstream. People are going to be texting a whole lot faster.
Did you know that the original Swipe was a startup in Edmonton?
Was it?
Yes, if I
Oh,
remember right, it was the oldest Robin Marsden, I believe was his name, and he started it up with a couple of buddies, and then I'm trying to remember who bought them. I feel like it was SwiftKey, and
uh-huh.
then I think Google got the rights through SwiftKey, even though I still install SwiftKey on my Android, just
Yeah,
because I've always had it, and it also gets used to my patterns. I mean, you could say that's privacy issue, but I don't care if they see what I'm
that's
texting.
cool.
But
And you
in any
guys
case,
have
yeah.
BioWare too in Edmonton, right? So you're
Yeah.
rocking over there.
Yeah, we and yada yada, and we've got some interesting tech companies, but we're probably a little bit more tech savvy than say Calgary. Stick it, Calgary.
Yeah, stick it in your oil companies.
Calgary's all oil. And
Yeah.
Edmonton tends to be focused more on IT and then the blue collar side of things, putting things together. But in any case, um, yeah, I mean, Swipe just just got to iOS. I thought you guys had it forever. Like I was
No,
really
no,
quite
it's
surprised.
been something we've been mashing for a while.
Wow.
The other thing is Face ID is going to be 30% faster. The downloads are supposed to be 50% smaller, 100% faster at launch. That's really cool that the downloads are
Yes.
going to be smaller because it's true. Every time I develop a game for iOS, it's literally 60 megs bigger than my Android ones.
Really?
And I remember I had a friend be like, "How come your game's like 120 megs?" And I'm like, "It's only 19 megs for Android, so I don't know what Apple's throwing in there."
Yeah.
And so I think this is another catch-up thing. I mean, they make it sound so great, but my Android game, and it's literally the exact same game,
Yeah.
20 megs to 120 meg. There's a 100 meg difference there.
Well, now it's gonna be 20 to 60.
Right.
It's still three.
Underwhelmed again. I'm underwhelmed.
That's the other thing is you watch these keynotes and like everybody in the audience, even these fanboys, that you could tell they just weren't feeling it. Like back when Steve Jobs used to get up there and he
With his
announced like
turtleneck, yeah.
first MacBook Air or the first iPad or right like and people were losing their mind.
Losing their minds.
It was just like watching an Elvis Presley concert back in 81 and people were like or Michael Jackson in 82 people passing out but no and now they're like and now we get Swipe.
That's funny.
That's great.
Okay, here's another ridiculous one that I want to talk about, the Memoji stickers.
Yes.
I think they're cool, but do you really need an A9 chip for them? That was
Do
ridiculous.
not need an A9 chip for them, that's for sure.
Well, they did. They said you need an A9 chip for
So
them.
they're not gonna support them with anything else.
Yeah,
And use the Face ID to kind of map your face. And I got to tell you, Apple does it better than anybody in the Android world as far as making these memojis. So Samsung tried, and it just was freakishly scary. And
yes, I've
nobody
seen some of
looked
them.
good, right? Like and everybody, let's just remind everybody, they're all copying Snapchat.
Yeah.
Snapchat was the first one that came out with this concept, and it was great and it was cool. And then Apple copied it, and then they used their Face ID to map the face and do mannerisms, and that was kind of cool because you could do the video ones. And then Samsung tried to copy it, and it was freaky and scary, and I never use it even though my phone could do it.
You
So
send it to Sharon. Ah.
I mean they're cool, but really everybody still just does it with Snapchat, and
Yeah.
then they copy it over to their text messages. I think on Apple it's going to be nice, and you should be able to receive it in a text, so the sticker should still come to you in a text, but it would probably using SMS or SSMS,
Yeah,
whatever it's called.
it's with their messenger, their messages app.
Yeah.
I also have $1 million idea that I'll tell you afterwards that I think would be better than these memojis, but I can't
And it,
tell it to you over the podcast or someone's gonna steal it and do it before I do.
It's gonna be an emoji. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh wait, crap.
It's gonna be a MacBook Pro emoji. Cheese grater.
Cheese
So
grater.
I don't know. Okay, well, let's talk about the Apple Watch because I actually thought this was kind of cool.
Yeah,
That um, to me, the biggest thing about Apple Watch is they now have their own app store. So before, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never had an Apple Watch, it seemed like any app that you had installed on your watch, you had to have the companion app installed on your phone. And so the last iteration of the Apple Watch suddenly meant that you could download music or stream music from your watch. I think it was download music. I think this one now lets you stream. And then all of a sudden you didn't have to go to the gym with a honking phone in your pocket.
right.
And that was a big deal. But you still had to have companion apps. Well, now there's an app store just for your Apple Watch, and it will show only apps that work on your watch. So that's kind of cool. And I think that's a great way to move. And I think Android's got a lot of catch up to do when it comes to smartwatches.
It's true, but it's still underwhelming. I'm underwhelmed.
You're like,
Woo! We can actually stream Spotify on a watch. Underwhelmed.
yeah, actually, you know what? I believe Fitbit's been streaming Spotify for a
For a
while.
while, yeah.
And they don't.
The other thing that I was going to say that's exciting is actually the calculator. That's kind of fun. Do you remember back in the 80s when we were all in our physics test pulling out beep, beep, beep?
Yes. I watched like that when I was 8, and it was the bomb. It was the
Yes, yes.
calculator, and I remember I felt like I was cheating when I was in school.
But you were not cheating. Okay, now I want to talk about the iPad OS, which is another copy of Android. So you wrote that it's closer to OS 10 for functionality. I wrote these pin widgets look just like Android has been doing for years. So they're like, we
Yes.
have this new great feature where you can put the weather on your home screen. I'm like, we've been able to do that with Android since 2010, right?
So,
Like 9 years
the
ago.
very first Androids, that was the big thing. That was the draw to pull you from Apple. Yeah. So when did the iPhone come out? Was they just had an Android?
2008, 7,
2008.
2007.
Yeah, so I think it was like 2008 or 2009 when widgets first came out, and that was kind of cool. You could have your weather on your Android phone that's like the size of a brick, but still, yeah, that's really
And
great.
now in 2019, we can put our weather on our iPad.
But you can't put it on your iPhone.
No, they haven't.
Still
Maybe next year. I'm
notifications.
underwhelmed.
Well, okay, let's talk about why it looks closer to Mac OS. So, really, I think that the file system looks a little bit more like you're navigating on a computer. You can actually now connect up to network servers. So that's kind of cool. If your work has a network server, you should be able to now assign it and access it on your iPad. So imagine at the hospital that you worked in, now you can, with an iPad, access all kinds of server information. Whereas before, you probably had to go through a third-party server app. So it would be like instead of natively connecting, you're now trusting all this information through a third party, like Dropbox or some other form of storage. And not the best. And I'm sure a lot of people are using free Google storage and things like that, but now you can actually connect directly. So I think that's a big deal from the office point of view. And then here's some more underwhelming. You can now plug a thumb drive
Oh my
into
gosh.
the iPad Pro.
You know what? I mean, just take a page out of Microsoft's book, freaking make the OS for the iPad the same as OS 10 and just call it a day.
Holiday because it's powerful enough. And your
Yeah.
my Microsoft Surface Pro. I've got the Surface Pro 3. It's already, I think the Surface Pro 7 is coming out, so it's 4 years old. It's 4 years old, Dan, and it's still got way more functionality than an iPad
Oh,
Pro.
100%. Yeah. You could
It's a
have
full
connected to those
computer.
servers and
Yeah,
USB plugs years ago.
yeah. And I was playing GeForce Now on it, right? Like I was playing a game as if I had a honking GPU and the best i9 9000K overclock processor on a tablet slash laptop. So yeah, Apple's doing a lot of catch up, and I think it's not looking good for them. What's their stock doing? Have you been watching?
Yeah, it's actually better today, but I think that has more to do with the Fed promising that they might cut rates in the summer. But in the past week, I mean, with the tariffs and everything with China and Trump, it's really fallen, like I think to the low 170s. And
Well,
if you remember, just a month or two ago, it was up in the 200s. So
yeah, let's get political. Political. I mean, the trade war is causing all kinds of grief. I mean, let's take a few minutes to talk about Huawei because Huawei's really getting pummeled in this. In fact, I almost feel like we're doing an obituary right here about Huawei.
yeah.
They are totally backed by the Chinese government. So we're talking about one of the largest economies in the world is backing Huawei. But with these tariffs, all like the P20s and the P30s, these beautiful phones that have some of the best cameras. In fact, I almost bought Sharon a P30 Pro
Really?
because of its phone. I mean, the phone's got an amazing zoom and it's got the dark mode feature. It's not quite as good as Google's, but it's close. It's dang close. And you got the crazy 30 times zoom, like 30 times zoom. That's crazy. And it's beautiful pictures. Like they really had great hardware and they were marrying it with Android. But then with the latest sanctions, and all of a sudden they're listed as one of the blacklisted companies, and no longer can any American company work for them. So it's not just their phones that are in trouble with Android. So they're allowed to use whatever Android systems they have now. And at first, and I think we reported last week that they weren't going to have access to the Play Store. They will continue to have access to the Play Store, but new apps may not be, well, definitely will not be supported by the phone. So it's a question of if the new apps are even going to work or not on it. And they definitely won't be getting the upgrade to Android Q until all this goes away. And that's something to keep in mind. It all could go away. Like once these negotiations are over, it could go away. But right now, it looks terrible. They went from being the #2 cell phone provider in the world to actually making an announcement this week that they are stopping production of their phones.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
So apparently they've got a lot of these phones already made, and I believe that they have stopped production. If they haven't stopped, then they've greatly pulled it back.
Wow.
Other problems they have, Huawei does way more than phones. Like if you Google them and see what they actually make, they make tons. They make computers. They make robot vacuum cleaners. They make just about anything that could have a
5G
processor chip.
infrastructure, right?
5G, that's huge. They're huge into telecom. And so their telecom's getting pummeled, their cell phones are getting pummeled. And now here's the other interesting thing that I read, anything with an SSD. So apparently an American company, and I really should have researched this, but they've got the patent for SSD technology. So technically you can't even sell an SSD hard drive or SSD drive to Huawei right now.
Wow.
Because it's breaking the sanctions or the blacklist. So we could be doing an obituary here in a month or two.
We'll have to make a special podcast for it. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. That is Tech Time. Please share this with a friend, like us on YouTube, and smash that like button and subscribe.
And look forward to news on Stadia. We're excited about it and
Yeah.
look forward to reporting on it.
All right. Have a great week.